If you are holding an iPhone right now, its glass panel, sapphire camera lens, and Acoustics parts probably all came from factories in China. You've probably heard these names before: Luxshare Precision, Lens Technology, and Gore-Tex, the big three of Apple's Chinese supply chain. And if you haven't heard of them, you've definitely heard this line.
我是说在座的真的都他妈是供应商供的，你在那儿装什么孙子呢？我们都是方案整合商。
But here's the thing, those same factories that once built iPhones for Apple are now building phones for Huawei, Xiaomi, and Oppo. Yeah, Apple basically trains its own competition. Apple works with 470 major suppliers worldwide, and 202 of them are based in China. Nearly half of all iPhone components are made in China. Over the past 15 years, China's Apple chain companies have seen their revenues multiply several times over. They started as small Apple assemblers and grow into global manufacturing giants. So the question is, what exactly Apple do behind all this? Apple's partnership model is brutally simple. Place orders, pay upfront, send engineers, and build together. When a K project starts, Apple doesn't just buy parts. It puts in money, sends its engineers straight into the factories, and literally works shoulder to shoulder with suppliers, fixing production lines, checking yield rates, getting things right. The best example, Lens Technology. Back when Apple was trying to mass produce iPhone glass, Apple COO Jeff Williams and Lens engineers camped inside the factory for 3 straight months. 3 months. That kind of hand-holding growth gave Lens not just cash flow, but massive pressure to level up. From 2010 to 2024, Apple's orders made up between 71 and 49% of its revenue. And you might wonder why that number keeps dropping. Subscribe and you'll find out at the end. In 2024 alone, Apple contributes 34.5 billion RMB, about 49.45% of Lens' total revenue. And thanks to that steady stream of orders, Lens' revenue jumped from under 5 billion RMB to almost 70 billion, over 3.5 billion in net profit. They dare to invest, dare to expand, and that's why Lens is where it stayed. In 2018, its capital spending hit 9.1 billion RMB and stayed around 4.5 to 7 billion a year for the next 4 years, over 24 billion in total. By 2024, cash flow reached 10.89 billion RMB, and its debt to asset ratio dropped to 39.7%. Pretty sold. With that kind of confidence, you started aiming higher. And now it's eyeing a Hong Kong IPO in 2025 to raise around 4.8 billion HKD, part of which will fund new factories in Vietnam and Thailand, closely following Apple's global production shift. And then there's Luxshare Precision, another story of evolution under pressure. It started out making cables. In 2011, it entered the MacBook production line through acquisition. By 2013, it was producing iPhone day cables. In 2014, it secured the Apple Watch wireless charging module. And by 2017, it was assembling AirPods. Within just a few years, Luxshare went from small connectors to covering almost Apple's entire product lineup. In 2024, its sales to Apple reached 190.1 billion RMB, make up 70.74% of total revenue, a level it's maintained for years. That kind of certainly gave it the confidence to invest tens of billions every year, expanding into automotive, electronic, and telecom equipment. Apple's projects also pushed Luxshare to evolve. To build the Apple Watch charger, it had to master high-frequency wireless and micro-packaging. To make AirPods, it had to perfect acoustic design and automated assembly. Those abilities become its moat later. Luxshare took everything it learned from Apple and passed it on Chinese brands. The Huawei Mix 16 charging module and the earphones and cables, they all carry Luxshare fingerprints. It achieved what you could call a dual-chain resonance, running both Apple chain and domestic Chinese chain at once. In short, Apple never just buy products. It uses money, technology, and standards to push the entire supply chain to evolve. We'll start with Apple ruthless standards. Apple doesn't just hand you a rule book. It teaches you how to mate it. It creates an incredibly detailed document called the Supplier Responsibility Standards, covering hundreds of specific indicators across labor rights, human rights, environmental responsibility, and ethical conduct. Every year, Apple sends out teams for on-site audits. Each factory gets a scorecard, granting them across 3 categories: labor and human rights, health and safety, and environmental management. In total, there are over 500 individual criteria, all rated on a 100-point scale. Apple conducts random inspections around the world each year. If a supplier fails to meet the standards, they are given a deadline to fix it or they are out. And that's just one part of Apple's massive evaluation system. Even when it comes to employee training, Apple gets involved personally. If you've ever worked in a factory, you know what training is really like: 10 safety rules of a board, if there are any training at all. But in Apple's supply chain, the curriculum looks like more this: programming, automation, equipment maintenance, mental health, nutrition and disease prevention, rights awareness, and women's empowerment, career education for people with disabilities, and even Vision Pro interaction workshops. It's all real career building skills. If I keep reading the list, the video will never end. To make sure the training actually happens, Apple set up a $15 million supplier employee development fund designed to help everyone in the supply chain grow, from line workers to supervisors all the way to management. Apple even built an education center at Zhejiang University where factory workers can take class and run experience use Apple device. It's basically a university for supply chain. Since the program began, more than 8 million people across Apple suppliers have taken part in these trainings. Some even built apps good enough to be listed on App Store. Picture that: a factory worker wearing a Vision Pro headset, doing an interactive course. Surreal, right? In short, getting into Apple's supply chain is harder than getting into college. Staying in it is tougher than grad school. So just how high are Apple standards? Here are 2 lines straight from its official policy.
Where national laws and Apple's strict labor and human rights, environmental, health and safety standards differ, we follow the higher standards. Where national laws and Apple's high standards are in conflict, we respect national laws while seeking to honor the higher standards.
No wonder many companies say working with Apple feels suffocating at first. Even less technology admits public. As Apple pushes for tighter quality and process standards, their labor costs and equipment depreciation shot up, and profit margin shrank.
You're losing time on turn 6, Greg.
It's kind of all turns, Tim.
But in the long run, that pressure forced suppliers to invest heavily in R&D and automation. Back in 2010, Lance launched its automation strategy, building a 1,200% smart manufacturing R&D team. The result? Its per capita output rose from 172,000 RMB in 2011 to 408,000 RMB in 2023, while labor costs dropped sharply as a share of total expense.
F1, baby.
Yes, F1, baby.
Then, let's talk about Apple's dual sourcing strategy. Apple's a genius. It knows that competition works better than instructions. It regularly brings new suppliers into the game to keep the old one on edge. According to industry reports, parts of iPhone 17 series glass cover orders may have gone to BioCrystal. And Bio has been Lens Technology's long-time rival in a high-end glass. The two have been competing, tracked since the very first iPhone. Apple's logic is clear: when one company gets too comfortable, it backs another. Competition is the strongest driver, so inside Apple's supply chain, there's never a real safe zone. Today's partner could be tomorrow's rival. And precisely because of this external competition, Lens has had to turn that sense of crisis into innovation. The forced upgrade process became its growth energy. In recent years, Lens and R&D spend has grown from just over 600 million RMB to more than 2 billion RMB, roughly 4% of revenue, with continuous bets on new material, new equipment, and new manufacturing process. Not just to keep up with Apple, but to make up sure no companies pulls ahead. Every new Apple product is basically a tech exam, from the dual glass panels of iPhone 4 to the Ceramic shelf on the iPhone 12 and now to the one base current front cover of the Vision Pro. It has evolved from flat 2D panels to 2.5D curved edges and finally to full 3D contour glass. Apple's design imagination was gradually caught up by real manufacturing capability. It not only made curved screen possible across many modules, but also achieved what Zhou Qunfei called the hardest piece of glass in her 13 years career. In 2020, Lens spent 9.9 billion RMB to acquire two of Catcher Technologies' factories in Taizhou, filling its gap in metal structural parts. That wasn't just expansion, it was a supply chain consolidation driven directly by Apple. It transformed Lens from a glass parts supplier into a comprehensive device manufacturer, laying the foundation to one day serve domestic brands with full device production. Apple's logic has never been to have one company, as opposed to the entire chain forward. Through standards and competition, it forced every supplier onto the same path of evolution. As a result, China's supply chain started benchmarking itself against the world's best, buying the most advanced CNC machine, testing instruments, and industrial robots. Building highly automated, fully digital production lines, even creating lines out of factories where everything runs in total darkness, because in future, no humans are needed. At the same time, Apple has been reshaping manufacturing through environmental standards. For example, Shandong Innovation Company, with Apple's support, developed an animation plastic separation and purification system that allows recycled aluminum to be used in the carbon-neutral MacBook chassis. So you say, Apple standards aren't just tough, they are a form of systemic education. Through audits, training, policy, and competition, Apple has pushed China's entire supply chain to evolve from OEM factories into world-class manufacturers. Apple might be the hardest client to serve, but it's also the best teacher. Its standards harder than getting into MIT. But over time, they realized something big. You can't spend your whole life just working for Apple, and then something almost magic happened. Have you ever noticed? Every time a new technology appears, suddenly every phone brand has it overnight. Ceramic bags, curved glass, ceramic shelled panels, that shimmering rainbow finish on the back, yeah, that too. These weren't exclusive inventions, no one owns them. They just at some point matured within the supply chain itself. Once Apple perfects a process, a material, or a yield system, that entire production logic, along with its pen ecosystem, spreads outwards. It gets replicated, adapted, extended, technology from the lab to the production line, and then from the production line to every other brand. That's why today Huawei, Oppo, Vivo, and Xiaomi can so quickly launch phones that match Apple in design, imaging, glass, charging, and assembling quality. In the next episode, we'll start with lens technology and the women who, with a single piece of glass, open the door to the world. Thanks to Tuny's basic plan for supporting this video. All the background music was made with Tuny using simple text prompts. Super easy, and it gets you the perfect soundtrack every time.